Hey guys, today I'm going to show you a step-by-step process that I took to create a soft silicone slimer sculpture in a rigid epoxy mold. Now let's just slime into this project and see how it's done. If you guys would like to see the making of the mold for this project, which is a rigid epoxy mold, you can click on the link above or in the description below, and that will take you to that video. To start the casting process, we're going to mix up some EcoFlex 0035. This is a fast-setting silicone, and as you can notice, I already pre-mixed the pigment into the part A. To get the right color tone, I mixed the Ignite pigment with some Silk Pig Electric. The working time of this material is 2.5 minutes and a cure time of 5 minutes. Work quickly but thoroughly. Once the material is mixed thoroughly, we can pour it into the mold and spread it around using a chip brush. Again, work thoroughly but work quickly because the material will set up in no time at all. You can see that some of the material, the EcoFlex, is still moving in the mold. It's slumping down. You want to keep brushing the material until it stops moving. That's when the material working time has expired. And here you can see how beneficial it is to have an extremely lightweight mold that you can easily maneuver around while still applying the material. Once you use up a batch of material, mix up a second batch and follow the same application procedure. When adding pigment, make sure that you add the same amount to every batch. That way, there won't be a stark difference between the batches once all the material has been applied. You can see I'm simply sprinkling the silicone around inside the mold to spread it out a little bit, and then following up with a chip brush, spreading it around, brushing it around, making sure to cover each segment of the mold. Additional layers are then mixed and applied in the same manner. We want to make sure that we get a layer of the EcoFlex on the entire inside of the mold. This is going to be the print coat or the first coat, skin coat of our casting. When I'm not working on the mold, I like to cover it with a piece of plastic. This prohibits any dust and particles from landing inside my mold and potentially causing delamination issues. The EcoFlex 0035 is now allowed to cure for 5 minutes. Once the first layer had 5 minutes to cure and set up, we're going to follow up and do a second layer using the same technique and same method. Now here I wanted to show you that I'm focusing on areas that have ridges in them. So these areas with the ridges poke out in our mold and will create thin areas in our casting. And to make sure that our silicone skin doesn't rip when somebody tugs and pulls on it, we're going to embed some reinforcement cloth in that area. This is a crucial area, and I wanted to make sure that the skin of our final casting is going to be strong enough and won't rip in this section. So reinforcement cloth is laid into the liquid silicone and then patted into the silicone using a chip brush. Power mesh is a bidirectional material, which means it stretches in all directions, making it a perfect for reinforcing of silicone rubber. It moves and flexes with the cured silicone. So when you are choosing a material for reinforcement like this, make sure that it is a bidirectional material. Additional silicone is then mixed up and applied over the reinforcement cloth, bonding it, embedding it in the skin of our buildup here. So it's going to become a permanent part of the buildup that we're creating. The EcoFlex 0035 is now allowed to cure for 5 minutes. Now, once the skin has set up, we're going to mix up some backup filler. This is the EcoFlex Gel 2. This is a platinum silicone rubber gel, and it's going to simulate super soft skin or fatty tissue. This is a 1:1 mix ratio by volume, so no gram scale is necessary, while it has a pot life of 20 minutes and a cure time of 50 minutes. Again, we're pigmenting the material, and I'm going to strategically pour it into areas of our buildup that needs to be super soft. So areas that need to be super soft, like the belly rolls, the chin, the lips, that are going to be extra soft. We're going to pour some of the EcoFlex gel in that area and then allow it a partial setup so the material doesn't move. So once we apply this material, we're going to allow it about 40 minutes before applying a encapsulation layer with the EcoFlex 0035. All right, so once we mixed another batch of the EcoFlex 0035, we're going to apply it over the entire surface just like we did in the beginning, encapsulating that extra soft EcoFlex gel too that we put into the sections of the belly and the lips. Now everything is allowed 5 minutes to cure before proceeding on to the next step. Again, I like to cover up the entire mold so that no dust particles actually make it inside there. Now, before moving on to the next step, I do need to create some keys. Now, the Moldstar 20T has a easy and convenient mix ratio of 1:1 by volume. No gram scale is necessary. While the working time or pot life is 6 minutes, the material cures in 30 minutes. Just like the EcoFlex, this material is translucent. The T stands for translucent and is easy to pigment. Furthermore, it's important that this material is a little bit stiffer. The higher thermometer allows us to firmly embed the keys into the support shell without the worry of them popping out because the silicone is too soft. Once I mix the material, I can pour it into my molds, and in this case, the mold is a U-channel, aluminum U-channel that I marked with platinum silicone only. That key is going to get chopped up into several smaller strip keys, while the little ketchup cups in the back, I only pour partially and therefore control the thickness of the key that we're making. If we make it too thick, first of all, we're wasting material, we're adding weight to the build, and we're not making it any better for ourselves. So it is very strategic that we're pouring these keys in these cups to this thickness. As always, plan ahead, understand what you're doing so that you don't get surprises as you're working on your project. The Moldstar 20T is allowed 30 minutes to cure before demolding. We can demold the keys in half an hour's time and then cut them into shape and size that we need. So this long stripe here, that's going to become the keys around the perimeter, around the opening of the casting in the back. While the round ones are going to be the body, the silicone body onto the armature that we're building. Also, quick note here that the keys that we're cutting are beveled. So the ones that we cut have bevels to it, and the ones that we poured, the round ones also have a bevel to them. Now the keys are applied to the inside of our buildup using some Silpoxy, and I'm simply going to apply them in strategic areas. I spread them about 10 inches from each other so that they're not too close, not too far, but we're going to hold the skin onto the armature that we're creating. Here you can see me applying the keys around the perimeter, and then once the keys are applied, that's how they look on the inside. So you can see that they're strategically spread out evenly and then around the perimeter. Now, the sewing pins that I'm using here hold the keys temporarily in place while the Silpoxy cures. The Silpoxy is now allowed to cure for 1 hour before proceeding on to the next step. Now, just like we did on the first and second layer and encapsulating layer, we're going to mix some EcoFlex 0035, and you can notice I'm mixing a larger batch here. So make sure that you understand the working time. So work fast, but work very deliberately. Understand what you're doing, and here we're going to spread that EcoFlex over the entire surface, encapsulating the keys that were applied in the last step. Notice how the silicone in the back is slumping down, and that is actually intentional. I am tilting the mold into the direction where I want the silicone to move so that I don't work against the material, but rather with the material. So work smarter, not harder in a way. All the layers are now allowed a cure of 24 hours before proceeding on to the next step. To create a strong and durable armature that's going to carry our silicone skin, I'm going to use the Epoxamite 100 laminating epoxy. Now, what's the reason for using epoxy here? We need a super strong yet lightweight structure that's going to carry all that weight of the silicone. So one of the ways to do that is to create a epoxy and glass fiber support armature. So once we spread some of the epoxamite in our mold, we're going to start laying some glass fiber cloth that was already pre-cut, including some that has holes for the keys. So you can see here I'm applying it right over the key, and that key has a very strategic hole in that cloth because that is going to hold the silicone on the armature. And you can see here that once you lay the glass fiber with the epoxy down, the glass fibers actually become translucent, transparentish, because the epoxy is now penetrating and soaking into those glass fibers. Now, to create a strong and durable armature that's going to hold this in place, I applied a total of 3 layers of epoxy and glass fibers. Once we apply all 3 layers, we're going to allow this material now to set up for 8 hours before moving on to the next step. To start the demolding process, I first want to take off some of the high points on the glass epoxy build that we have on the inside of the armature. This is going to make it easier for us to remove the inside armature from the silicone itself. Also, it'll prevent us from cutting our hands open while we're working on this mold. Note the anchors that you see here in the picture around the mouth opening. Those are embedded in the epoxy for 2 reasons. This is where we're going to suspend the casting from, so this is going to carry the entire weight of the casting and the armature, as well as help us demold the armature out of the mold. To start, I'm first going to remove the plugs that are in the mouth. So this is a 3-section plug here. In order to remove it, we have to make it out of 3 sections. And in order to remove the armature out of the mold itself, we do also need to remove this plug. And then we're going to remove one of the sides, one of the backing sides. Go slowly. And unfortunately here I did have a little bit of a cut, a rip in the silicone, but we can repair that, no problem. This repair will take place during the seaming process of the arms and the rest of the body. And then we're going to remove the other side, even more careful now, so we don't put another rip into our silicone skin. Slowly go around the perimeter. We're peeling back some of the silicone, and we're slowly peeling the mold away. So here we have it. And now to the fun part. So in order to remove the rest, we did utilize a crane here. So we strapped the armature to a crane. This is on hooks that I embedded in the armature itself, in the epoxy. So this is not going to break easily. Simply going to raise the crane and hold on to that mold until it actually pops. And there you have it. The reason why I made this out of 1 section in the front, so I don't have a seam line on the front, on the face itself that we have to fix. As you work with these molds, you'll discover either your mistakes or your successes in the mold design. Now, simply peel away the rest of the skin out of the mold. Go slowly, especially around those sharp edges where we put that reinforcement cloth into. Now, to create the arms for our build here, we utilize the same procedures as we did for the main body. with some small differences here and there. Because this is a small and hollow mold, we had to get creative as far as brushing on the silicone into the mold, closing it, and then doing another backup layer of rotational casting of the silicone. And we also did a similar application with the epoxy, where we actually rotocasted the epoxy inside the cavity and then only applied the glass fibers around the edge where the arm is cut off. That's going to be reinforced so that we can firmly attach it to the rest of the body. This goes right along the lines of thinking ahead so that we create a strong and durable bond between the joints when they meet each other. Go slowly and carefully when demolding this casting because you do have a rigid shell on the inside that might be rubbing against some sharp edges of your mold, and you don't want to create an unnecessary cut in the rubber. So go slowly. And also you can notice that all around the perimeter there's plenty of flashing of the silicone. That all needs to be trimmed down and then seamed so that it's seamless. And we're going to get to that aspect of the project a little bit further down the line. And to apply the arms to the main body, we first need to hang it and make it workable. Of course, you got to have a little bit of fun when you're doing these things. The next step here would be now to cut open the places where the arms are getting attached. And first we're going to cut some of the silicone out. Again, we got to put the arm insert here. And now do the other side as well because we're doing both sides at the same time. And we don't want to trim too much silicone away. Keep in mind that all of this needs to be seamed. So keep some of that silicone around the perimeter. And don't create sharp edges, sharp cuts at an angle. Rather, circular, consistent cut all around. Now, I like to clean the entire casting of any of the debris because we are getting ready for the seaming and painting process. So any schmutz, any dirt that has settled on the casting, I like to clean away. In this case, I do a cleaning with the isopropyl alcohol. Now, once that dries, we can start by fusing the arms, the armature of the arms to each other. And to help myself here, I'm using some screws. The epoxy is easy to drill and attach to itself using some screws. And then once that is temporarily in place, we can adhere it using some Super Instant. The Super Instant is a 2-component epoxy adhesive that is fast setting, therefore the Super Instant name. It has an easy-to-use 1:1 by volume mix ratio with a working time or pot life of 2.5 minutes and a handling time of 10 minutes, while a cure takes 16 hours. Once the Super Instant is mixed, we can apply it to the repair area, and as always, keep the working time of the material in mind as this product is very fast setting, so we don't want to get stuck with the material in a mixing cup. And I'm going to repeat that same application on the inside as well on the outside. Now, once we apply the adhesive, I'm going to inlay some glass fiber cloth into the epoxy adhesive. This is going to further strengthen the overall structure of the repair to create a strong and durable joint that is not going to easily break in case somebody bumps it. The Super Instant is now allowed to cure for 10 minutes before being handled. The same procedure, we're going to use some screws to put the 2 components of the armature together, and then using some Super Instant, we're going to fuse those 2 pieces of armature together. The Super Instant is allowed 10 minutes to cure so we can actually handle it, but if you want to put the material under stress, you should allow it 16 hours cure. Now for the seaming process of the silicone, we're going to be using the Silpoxy silicone adhesive, just like we did earlier for the keys. Here you can actually pigment the Silpoxy to give it a base color. Now, personally, the way that I like to work with the adhesive is that I would apply the Silpoxy to an area and then I would come back and pinch those areas using some sewing pins. It helps us to keep the two areas that we're trying to bond together temporarily, and once that adhesive is cured and dried, so an hour later, we can come back to that area and then remove those pins. Because they're so small, they won't damage the silicone, and we can easily remove them. Now here I'm actually using some screws to hold the silicone in place while I apply some of the Silpoxy. The screw itself, yes, it will go through the silicone and will leave a hole, but that's easily patchable and fixable with a little bit of Silpoxy. But it allows me to keep the material in a very specific place while I apply the silicone adhesive. So don't be afraid to test different methods and theories for your application based off your needs. And here I'm going to just fast forward to the application and the seaming process. I can tell you that it is very time consuming, and it does take a little bit of practice to make sure that everything lines up and actually looks seamless. And again, I'm going to allow the Silpoxy to cure for 1 hour before removing those pins and moving on to the next section. And here you can see the pins have been removed, and I come back with a little bit more of silicone. And here I am actually using the Silpoxy for the repair. So any seaming repairs here, I'm using the Silpoxy that I already pre-pigmented into the green color, so it matches the surrounding silicone that we're fixing. Here in the armpit area, there's actually quite a large section that needs to be filled in, and it needs to be filled in with a thickened product that will stay in place. So for that, we're using the same material that we use for the skin, the EcoFlex 0035. With some Thyvex thickener. This allows us to thicken the material where it will hold a vertical surface. The Silpoxy and the EcoFlex are now allowed to cure before moving on to the next step. While waiting for the adhesive to set up, I took a moment to cast a set of teeth out of the Featherlight lightweight casting resin and test fitted them into the mouth cavity to make sure I understand how they're going to attach to the rest of the build. So now that the seaming process has been completed and the Silpoxy has cured, we can proceed on to the next step, painting of our final casting here. So everything is seamed, all the parts are bonded together of the silicone, and we can focus on cleaning the silicone for the painting process. Now, for the painting process, I like to use the Coleman Camp Fuel, which is a solvent, to thin out the silicone with. It has a really good property with the silicone that it not only helps it thin the silicone, but also helps it adhere. So we're going to clean the entire surface of our casting. Now, to paint the silicone slimer that we created, we're going to be using a product called Psycho Paint. That's correct, you heard me right. It's called Psycho Paint. This is a clear, translucent platinum silicone base. It's a 2-component, A and B, that you mix equal amounts by either weight or volume. And then you can add your pigment and your solvent to thin it out so you can make it a painting medium. The working time of the material is 45 minutes, and a tack-free time is achieved after 2 hours. However, whenever you're adding solvents and diluting materials, that working time is extended and is not going to be true to the original working time. So keep that in mind. Now, how much solvent can you add to the mixture? You can add up to 500 parts. So anywhere between 200 and 500 parts of the mix ratio can be then added in solvent, making it ideal for airbrushing. Here you can see I'm already starting the painting process, and I'm starting with the mouth area here. It's because it's the area that I know I'm going to paint over several times, so if I make a mistake, it'll be easy to fix there. So once I'm happy with the color combination that I have going on here, then I can start applying it over the entire casting. So you can see here that our casting is going from a matte, dull green finish to a more glossy green. Silicone naturally has a very glossy finish. That's why we're seeing that in our final painting here. So something I wanted to mention on the painting process here, it is a multi-layer process. So you're going to start with the lightest colors and then work your way up to the darker tones. This is extremely long and time-consuming process. I can't say that I like it, but it's a process that is part of the finishing of our casting. So multiple different batches of the Psycho paint were mixed with the green pigments and then applied to our casting. Here you can see that some of those skin folds are getting darker and darker. That's because we're applying darker and darker material to it. Here I'm following up with a really dark green color in those folds just to make them more pronounced and visual so that they're easy to spot from further away. Now, when painting different aspects of this project, I will vary the amounts of the solvent that I'm adding, therefore making the mixture overall, the Psycho paint mixture, quite different consistency. So sometimes much thicker, sometimes much more liquid. Now that we painted most of the body, we can focus our attention to the mouth cavity. And for that, I'm actually mixing the silicone much thicker. This allows me to apply a solid color in very few layers. In 1 or 2 layers, I'll be able to apply a nice fleshy tone of the entire inside of the mouth. The casting itself was very slick and smooth. We're going to add some texture to the inside of the mouth by using a thickened Psycho paint batch to not only paint but also add texture. The Psycho paint is now allowed a cure of 2 hours before moving on to the next step. Now, a couple of highlights, a couple of high spots, a little bit of the yellow-green, I guess, to add some highlights to our casting, adds further depth to the final piece. Now, keep in mind that the Psycho paint does have a long working time of 45 minutes, and with the addition of a solvent, in this case the Coleman fire fuel, it even prolongs that working time a little bit more. So you will have a lot more working time when the Psycho paint is thinned out with a solvent like this than the 45-minute that the material calls for. The material is now allowed 4 hours cure before moving on to the next step, and that is because we want to give it plenty of extra time because we thinned it out using a solvent and want to give it enough time to evaporate. Now that we're in the final stages of our project here, I wanted to encapsulate all the painting layers with one more clear layer of the Psycho paint. This is unpigmented Psycho paint. Not only to encapsulate all the painting layers, but also to give our casting here a final glossy finish. Slimer is naturally slimy and therefore wet, and we want to mimic that wet look in our casting. We painted the resin teeth already and inserted those, as well as the eyes, the epoxy eyes that we made. If you guys would like to see those being made, the eyes specifically, let us know down in the comments below, and we'll see if we can make a video on the creation of the eyes. The final layer of the EcoFlex is allowed to cure for 10 minutes. All right, so here we have our final casting. We're doing a quick inspection here. The belly looks pretty nice. I'm really pleased how this came out. The lips is soft. We can do a little punching bag. Really happy with the way this project came about. And it's now time to get it installed. And here is the installation at our Reynolds Advanced Materials branch here in Pennsylvania. And you can see the final casting looks absolutely stunning and is a eye turner definitely for everybody coming into the store. Now, this has definitely been a more complex and difficult project to execute, but I did want to show you guys the results that are possible when your imagination and understanding of material intersects and you understand how to execute your projects. I guess you can clearly say that your imagination is the limit. Now, if you got inspired by this project and you'd like to give your own projects a go and need some material, you can visit any one of our distributors around the world. So, and there you have it, a step-by-step process that I took to create a soft and stretchable, flexible silicone Slimer piece using a rigid epoxy mold. Now, if you have an idea about what we should do next, please let us know down in the comments below. If you like this video, hit the thumbs up button. To keep up with our latest mold making, casting, and other videos, remember to subscribe.